The stars had never seemed so cold as they did on the day the Valith warships surrounded the human colony vessel, Prometheus Rising Captain Marcus Cole stood on the bridge and watched through the viewing screen as 17 alien cruisers formed a perfect circle around his ship, their hulls black as the void between galaxies, their weapon systems glowing with an eerie purple light that pulsed like a heartbeat. "They're hailing us, Captain," said Lieutenant Chun, her voice steady despite the fear that flickered in her eyes. Marcus nodded and straightened his worn uniform jacket, the same one he had worn for 12 years of deep space exploration, the same one that had seen him through asteroid storms and engine failures and the long, lonely months between stars put them through. The screen flickered and a face appeared that was not quite a face at all, but rather a collection of features that the human brain struggled to process. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern, skin that shifted colors like oil on water, a mouth that seemed to contain too many teeth arranged in spiraling rows. Human vessel. The alien spoke in a voice that somehow bypassed the ears and resonated directly in the skull. "You have entered the sovereign space of the Valith Eternal Empire. You will power down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Resistance will result in the immediate destruction of your ship and the death of all 3,217 souls aboard." Marcus felt his crew's eyes on him, felt the weight of those 3,000 lives pressing down on his shoulders like a physical force. "We are a peaceful exploration vessel," he said, keeping his voice calm and measured. "We meant no intrusion into your territory. Our star chart showed this region as uninhabited." The alien made a sound that might have been laughter. "All regions belong to the Eternal Empire. Human, your ignorance does not excuse your trespass. You will comply, or you will die. This is not a negotiation." Marcus looked at his tactical officer, who shook his head almost imperceptibly. They had no weapons that could scratch those warships, no speed that could outrun them, no shields that could withstand their fire. "We will comply," Marcus said, and the words tasted like ash in his mouth. The boarding party arrived within the hour. Tall creatures in armor that seemed to absorb light itself, their movements precise and mechanical as they swept through the ship and gathered the crew into the main cargo bay. Marcus watched as people huddled together, families clutching children, engineers holding hands with doctors. The old and the young pressed together in their shared terror. A Valith officer approached him, this one larger than the others, with golden bands around its forearms that suggested rank. "You are the leader of this vessel." It was not a question. "I am Captain Marcus Cole. You will come with us." Captain Marcus Cole, the Eternal Queen, wishes to see the face of humanity before she decides whether your species is worthy of service or only fit for extinction. Marcus felt something cold settle in his stomach, but he did not let it show on his face. "And my crew? They will remain here as insurance for your good behavior. If you please the Queen, they may yet live. If you do not," the officer paused and made that horrible laughing sound again. "Well, there are always more stars to harvest for the Empire's fuel needs." They took him aboard one of the warships, and Marcus tried to memorize everything he saw. The layout of the corridors, the positions of guards, the strange symbols that glowed on the walls in patterns that hurt to look at directly. But mostly he noticed the other aliens. They were everywhere on the ship. Dozens of different species working alongside the Valith. But there was something wrong with them, something missing behind their eyes. They moved when commanded and stopped when told, and never once did Marcus see any of them speak unless spoken to first. They were slaves. He realized, but it was worse than slavery. They were hollow, empty shells that walked and breathed, but had forgotten how to live. The journey to the Valith homeworld took 3 days. Marcus spent most of it in a small cell that was not uncomfortable, but was very clearly a cage. They fed him food that was bland but nutritious. They gave him water that tasted faintly of copper. They did not speak to him or answer his questions. On the third day they came for him. The throne world of Nathara was beautiful in the way that a funeral is beautiful. All dark elegance and cold perfection. The cities rose in spiraling towers of black stone that reflected no light. The skies churned with purple clouds that never parted to show the sun. They brought Marcus to a palace that seemed to grow from the very bedrock of the planet, its walls carved with scenes of conquest and subjugation. Species after species bowing before the throne. The throne room itself was vast beyond comprehension. 1 kilometer long at least, with ceilings so high they vanished into darkness. Along both sides of the great hall stood representatives of the conquered races. Thousands of them, all on their knees with their heads bowed, and at the far end, on a throne of something that looked like crystallized shadow, sat the eternal Queen Ceratos. She was ancient. That much was clear. Her 4 eyes held the weight of millennia. Her skin had faded to a pale silver that spoke of countless centuries spent in this lightless hall. Upon her head rested a crown that seemed to be made of frozen starlight, pulsing with power that Marcus could feel pressing against his mind like fingers searching for a way in. The guards marched him forward, past the kneeling masses, past the silent watchers with their empty eyes, until he stood alone before the throne. So, the queen spoke, and her voice filled the chamber like thunder rolling across mountains. This is humanity. She studied him the way a scientist might study an insect pinned to a board. Small, she continued. Fragile, short-lived. Your species is barely out of its cradle by the standards of the cosmos. You have not even learned to travel faster than light without tearing holes in space itself. Marcus said nothing because there was nothing to say. Everything she spoke was true, and yet the queen leaned forward, and the crown blazed brighter. There is something about you, something my seers could not quite define when they first detected your vessel, something that made them recommend caution. She smiled, and it was not a pleasant expression. I do not believe in caution. Human, I believe in power. I believe in order. I believe in the natural hierarchy of the universe where the strong rule and the weak serve. She gestured at the thousands of kneeling aliens. Every species in this room once thought themselves mighty. Every one of them believed they could resist the eternal throne. And every one of them learned the truth. Her 4 eyes fixed on Marcus with terrible intensity. You will learn it too. The throne room fell into a silence so complete that Marcus could hear his own heartbeat echoing in his ears. Queen Ceratos rose from her crystallized throne, and the movement sent ripples of fear through the kneeling masses. Ambassadors and warriors and priests of a dozen conquered worlds pressed their faces closer to the cold stone floor, as if trying to disappear into it. Do you know why they kneel? Human, the queen asked as she descended the steps of her dais, each footfall sending small tremors through the ground. Because you will kill them if they do not. Marcus replied. The queen laughed, and it was a sound like glass breaking in the depths of space. No. Human, I could kill them standing or kneeling or running or fighting. Their posture matters nothing to my power. They kneel because the crown makes them kneel. She touched the band of frozen starlight on her head, and Marcus felt the pressure against his mind intensify, like a hand slowly closing around his thoughts. This crown was forged by the first Valith Emperor 10,000 years ago, using techniques that have been lost to time. It connects to every conscious mind within its range and finds the core of that consciousness, the seat of will, the center of self. She was closer now. Close enough that Marcus could smell something like ozone and ancient dust coming from her silver skin. And once it finds that center, it simply pushes. Every species has a breaking point. Human, a threshold beyond which the mind cannot resist. The Tovani last an average of 4 seconds. The Keth manage nearly 12. The stubborn Veloci once produced a champion who resisted for almost a full minute before his mind shattered, and he became what you see around you. She gestured at the hollow-eyed servants who stood motionless along the walls, broken, empty, obedient. This is the fate of all who resist, and this is the peace of all who submit. There is no third option. There has never been a third option. The queen stopped directly in front of Marcus, her 4 eyes boring into his 2. Your species is unknown to me, but all minds follow the same basic patterns. All consciousness bends before the crown. This is not cruelty, human. This is simply the natural order of the universe. She raised one hand and the crown blazed with cold white light. Kneel down, she commanded, and her voice carried the weight of 10,000 years of absolute rule. Or you will die. Marcus felt the pressure become a force, felt it slam against his mind like a battering ram against castle gates. His vision flickered and darkened at the edges. His heart stuttered in his chest as something cold wrapped around it and began to squeeze. He had never felt anything like it. It was as if the queen had reached inside him and grabbed the very essence of who he was. As if she was trying to crush his soul in her fist while his body still breathed. His knees trembled, and for a moment, he was certain they would buckle. Every instinct screamed at him to kneel, to submit, to give in to the overwhelming force that promised peace through surrender. His body wanted to collapse. His mind wanted to stop fighting. But somewhere deep inside Marcus Cole, in a place that the crown could not quite reach, something else stirred. He thought of his grandmother, who had walked 300 kilometers through a burning desert with 2 children on her back after her village was destroyed in the water wars. She had lost everything, but she had not stopped walking until her children were safe. He thought of his grandfather, who had survived the collapse of the Singapore Arcology by climbing 97 floors of shattered stairwells with a broken leg, refusing to die because his family was waiting at the top. He thought of all the humans who had come before him, the countless generations who had faced impossible odds and certain death and had simply refused to accept it. The crown squeezed harder. Marcus took a breath, and he stepped forward. The queen's 4 eyes widened in shock. A gasp rippled through the throne room. Thousands of voices crying out in disbelief as the impossible happened before them. Blood began to trickle from Marcus's nose, running down over his lips and dripping onto the stone floor. His hands shook, and his vision swam, and every nerve in his body screamed in agony. But his legs moved 1 step. Then another impossible. One of the queen's advisors whispered, "This is impossible." Marcus's voice came out strained and ragged, but it came out steady. "My great-great-grandmother survived something called the Dust Bowl, when the very earth turned to poison and tried to choke the life from her family. She did not kneel. Another step, more blood." His heart felt like it was being crushed by an iron hand, but still it beat. "My great-grandfather fought in a war where millions died for a few kilometers of frozen mud. He watched his friends fall around him, and he did not kneel." The queen backed away, her composure cracking for the first time in centuries. Her crown blazed brighter than ever before, but the human kept coming. "My mother raised 3 children alone after the economic collapse took everything we had. She worked 2 jobs and slept 4 hours a night for 15 years, and she did not kneel." Marcus was 5 meters from the queen now, his body failing but his spirit burning like a star going supernova. "We are humans," he said, and each word was a victory torn from the jaws of impossible pain. "We are afraid every single day of our short and fragile lives. We are afraid of death and loss and failure and the cold dark between the stars. 4 meters. But we have spent 100,000 years learning to walk forward anyway. 3 meters. You think your crown is powerful because it can touch the center of our minds and push. But you do not understand what you are pushing against. 2 meters. The queen stumbled backward against the steps of her own throne. her four eyes wide with an emotion she had not felt in 10,000 years. Fear. You are not pushing against one man, Marcus gasped, his legs finally failing as he collapsed to his knees, but not in submission. In simple exhaustion, you are pushing against every human who ever lived. Every ancestor who survived when they should have died. Every mother who protected her children against impossible odds. Every father who worked himself to death so his family could live. Every single one of us who looked at a hostile universe and said, "No, not today. We will not break today." He looked up at the Queen from his knees, blood covering his face. His body trembling with exhaustion, but his eyes still defiant. "Your crown has met its match," he said. "It has met stubbornness itself." Guards rushed forward with weapons drawn, their plasma lenses humming with deadly energy as they surrounded the bleeding human who knelt before their queen. Advisors shouted in confusion and fear. The kneeling ambassadors dared to raise their heads for the first time in decades to witness the impossible. Queen Serato stood frozen on the steps of her throne, the crown blazing in full power. Every ounce of her 10,000 years of psychic might focused on the single fragile creature before her, and still he did not break. "Kill him," one of the advisors screamed. "Kill him now before he destroys everything." But the Queen raised a hand and the guards stopped in their tracks. "No," she said, and her voice was different now, stripped of its ancient arrogance, replaced with something that sounded almost like curiosity. "I want to understand." She descended the steps until she stood directly over Marcus, looking down at him with her four eyes as he struggled to catch his breath. "How?" she demanded. "How are you doing this? The crown has never failed. In 10,000 years and 100 conquered species, it has never failed to find the center and break it." Marcus wiped the blood from his face with a shaking hand and laughed. A weak and ragged sound, but genuine, because you are looking for something that does not exist. "Explain." Marcus forced himself to stand, his legs trembling beneath him. The guards tensed, but the Queen waved them back. "Every species you have conquered has a structured mind," Marcus said. "Neat and organized, with a clear hierarchy of thoughts and a central point of consciousness that controls everything else. Your crown finds that center and overwhelms it, like cutting the head off a snake." The Queen nodded slowly. "But human minds are not like that," Marcus continued. "Our brains evolved on a death world where everything was trying to kill us. Disease and predators and climate and each other. We did not have the luxury of elegant mental architecture." He tapped his temple with one bloody finger. "Our consciousness is not a single point. It is a storm, billions of neurons firing in patterns so complex that even we do not fully understand them. There is no center to find, no head to cut off. Our sense of self emerges from the chaos rather than controlling it." The Queen stared at him for a long moment. "You are saying that your species is simply too mentally disordered for the crown to affect." "I am saying that what you call disorder, we call resilience when one part of our mind breaks. Another part steps up. When we lose one reason to keep fighting, we find another. Your crown cannot crush human consciousness, because human consciousness has no shape to crush." The Queen turned away from him and walked slowly back toward her throne, her long fingers trailing along the armrest as she thought. "This is unprecedented," she said quietly. "In all my centuries of rule, I have never encountered a mind that could resist the crown through sheer structural incompatibility. Your empire was built on one trick," Marcus said. "One weapon, one method of control. You never needed to develop anything else, because nothing else was ever necessary." He looked around at the still kneeling ambassadors, at the hollow-eyed servants, at the guards who watched him with expressions mixing fear and fascination. "We humans have never had that luxury. We have had to fight for every single thing we have ever achieved, against a hostile planet, against our own worst instincts. against the basic physics of a universe that seems designed to kill anything that dares to live. Marcus walked forward again, not threatening but simply refusing to stay in the place where the Queen had tried to put him. Do you know what we found when we first left our planet and ventured into space? We found radiation that could cook us alive in seconds. We found vacuum that could boil our blood. We found temperatures that range from hot enough to melt steel to cold enough to freeze oxygen solid. He spread his arms wide. Every single thing out here is trying to kill us. And yet here we are, crossing the void between stars and tin cans held together with hope and engineering. Because that is what humans do. The Queen turned back to face him. And there was something new in her expression, not fear exactly, but perhaps respect. Your species is insane, she said. Probably, Marcus agreed. But we are also still here, still breathing, still refusing to lie down and die no matter what the universe throws at us. And now we are in your space, Queen Cerratos. And you have a choice to make. A choice, the Queen repeated, her voice carrying a dangerous edge. You are alone, unarmed, surrounded by my guards in the heart of my empire. And you speak to me of choices. I am never alone, Marcus said simply. Even if you kill me here and now, there are 8 billion more humans back home. And every single one of them carries the same chaos in their heads, the same stubborn refusal to accept defeat, the same beautiful madness that brought us out of the caves and into the stars. He pointed toward the ceiling, toward the space beyond. My colony ship carries 3,000 humans. And beyond that, there are hundreds more ships, thousands of colonies, millions of families who have already spread across a dozen star systems. You cannot crown them all. You cannot break us one at a time. We reproduce too fast and spread too far and fight too hard. Marcus met the Queen's four-eyed gaze without flinching. Your empire has never faced anything like us. And now you have to decide what that means. The Queen was silent for a long time. The throne room held its breath. Thousands of beings watching the confrontation between the ancient monarch and the impossible human. Finally, the Queen spoke. What would you propose, human? If not conquest and not subjugation. Marcus smiled despite the pain that still racked his body. Let me tell you about something we humans learned a long time ago. Something called cooperation. The Queen ascended her throne once more, but she did not sit. Instead, she stood before the crystallized seat of power and looked down at Marcus with an expression he could not quite read. Cooperation. She repeated the word as if tasting something foreign. You stand in my throne room, bleeding and broken, surrounded by the military might of an empire that has crushed 100 civilizations. And you speak of cooperation. I stand in your throne room still breathing, Marcus corrected her gently. Which means your usual methods have failed. And that means we need to find a new way forward. One of the Queen's advisors stepped forward, his forearms gesturing angrily. My Queen, this is madness. We should kill this creature and destroy his ship and scour his homeworld from existence. They are just one species among billions. Their immunity to the crown is an anomaly. Nothing more. An anomaly that could spread. Another advisor interjected. This one older with silver threading through his dark scales. If word gets out that a species exists that can resist the crown, the other conquered worlds might begin to hope again. Hope is dangerous. The Queen raised a hand and both advisors fell silent. The human has a point, she said slowly. We have ruled through the crown for 10,000 years. We have never needed to develop alternative methods of control because the crown has always been sufficient. She looked at Marcus with newfound interest. But you are correct that I cannot crown 8 billion minds one at a time. And if your species truly cannot be broken by psychic force, then I must consider other options. You could try to destroy us, Marcus said. You have the ships and the weapons. But I wonder if you have the will. You doubt the resolve of the eternal empire. I doubt nothing, But I've watched your subjects since I arrived on this world, and I've noticed something interesting about them. Marcus gestured at the guards surrounding him, at the advisors clustered near the throne, at the servants who stood motionless along the walls. They are afraid of you. That much is obvious, but they are also bored, tired, going through the motions of existence without any real purpose or passion. Your empire has become stagnant, Queen Ceratos. You conquered everything, and now you have nothing left to strive for. The Queen's eyes narrowed dangerously. You presume to analyze my empire based on a few days of observation. I presume nothing. I simply see what is in front of me. And what I see is an empire that has forgotten how to grow, how to change, how to improve. You have spent 10,000 years maintaining the status quo, and the status quo has started to rot from within. Marcus took a step closer to the throne. And this time, the guards did not try to stop him. Humans are the opposite. We cannot sit still. We cannot stop changing and growing and reaching for something more. It is built into our very nature. We see a mountain and we have to climb it. We see an ocean and we have to cross it. We see the stars and we have to touch them. He smiled up at the ancient monarch. That restlessness, that constant drive to become something greater than we are, that is the real threat I represent, not my immunity to your crown, but the possibility that my species could remind your subjects what it feels like to want something. The Queen descended from her throne again, moving slowly, her eyes never leaving Marcus. You are suggesting that humanity could be valuable to the Empire, not as subjects, but as catalysts for change. I am suggesting that humanity could be valuable as partners, as equals working together towards something neither of us could achieve alone. Your empire has technology and resources beyond anything we have ever seen. Our species has the drive and creativity that your stagnation has cost you. The Queen was very close now. Close enough that Marcus could see the age in her eyes, the weariness that even 10,000 years of absolute power could not hide. And what would humanity want in return for this partnership? Freedom, Marcus said immediately. For my people and eventually for yours, your subjects deserve to think their own thoughts and make their own choices. They deserve to be people again instead of puppets. A shocked murmur ran through the throne room. The kneeling ambassadors stirred restlessly. The servants along the walls seemed to flicker with something almost like awareness. You asked me to dismantle everything my ancestors built, the Queen said quietly. I asked you to build something better. Your crown gave you power, but it also made you lazy. Why solve problems when you can simply force people to ignore them? Why innovate when you can simply command obedience? Your empire stopped growing the day that crown was forged, and it has been slowly dying ever since. Marcus reached out and did something that made every guard in the room tense with shock. He touched the Queen's arm, gently, the way one friend might touch another. You are tired, he said softly. I can see it in your eyes. 10,000 years of being obeyed but never respected, never challenged, never truly known by another being. That is not power, Queen Ceratos. That is the loneliest prison in the universe. For a long moment, the Queen stood motionless, her four eyes wide with an emotion that her subjects had never seen on her face before: vulnerability. How dare you, she whispered. But there was no anger in her voice, only wonder. I dare because I am human, Marcus replied. And humans have never known how to be properly afraid of anything. We walked up to saber-toothed cats with pointed sticks. We sailed across oceans in wooden boats. We split the atom and walked on our moon and sent our children to the stars. He gestured at himself, at his bloody and battered body. And now I am standing here, telling the most powerful being in the galaxy that she does not have to be alone anymore, that there is another way, that the universe is big enough for both conquest and cooperation. The Queen looked at his extended hand for a very long time. Throne room was utterly silent. every being within its walls understanding that something momentous was happening, that the next few seconds would determine the fate of civilizations. "If I accept your offer," the Queen said finally, "if I enter into partnership with your chaotic, impossible species, everything will change. The order I have maintained for 10,000 years will begin to unravel." "Yes," Marcus agreed. "But what grows in its place might be something far more magnificent than anything you ever imagined." The Queen reached out and she took his hand. 1 year had passed since the day a human refused to kneel. The galaxy would never be the same. Marcus Cole stood on the observation deck of the newly constructed Unity Station, watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the massive structure that hung in orbit above Earth. Valith cruisers flew alongside human freighters. Tovani trading vessels exchanged cargo with Keth exploration craft. And everywhere he looked, he saw something that would have been impossible just 12 months ago. "Hope, you seem lost in thought," said a familiar voice behind him. Marcus turned to find Queen Seratos approaching, but she looked different now. She no longer wore the robes of absolute monarchy. Instead, she was dressed in simple garments similar to what the humans wore. Practical and unassuming, and the crown was gone from her head. "Just thinking about how much has changed," Marcus replied. "Sometimes it feels like a dream." The Queen came to stand beside him at the viewing window. "I gave a speech today," she said, "to the assembled Council of Species. I told them that effective immediately, the psychic crown would be locked away in a secure vault, never to be used again." How did they react? The Valith nobles were furious. Several of them are already plotting rebellion. But the other species? The Queen paused, and something that might have been a smile crossed her alien features. "They wept, Marcus. Beings who had not felt a genuine emotion in centuries fell to their knees and wept with joy. The good kind of falling to their knees." Marcus said, "Yes, the good kind." They stood in companionable silence for a moment, watching the dance of ships outside the window. "I received a report from the Torvani homeworld this morning," the Queen continued, "for the first time in 3,000 years. They held a free election. The debates were apparently quite heated. There was even a fistfight at one of the rallies." Marcus laughed. "Is violence at political gatherings supposed to be a good thing? According to your human advisors, it means people actually care about the outcome. Apparently, you call it passionate democracy. That sounds about right." The Queen turned to face him fully. "I want to thank you, Marcus Cole, not for saving humanity. Your species was never truly in danger once I understood what you represented. But for saving me, saving you, from myself, from the prison I had built around my own heart. For 10,000 years, I told myself that absolute control was necessary for peace. That crushing the will of other beings was a kindness because it spared them the pain of choice." She looked out at the ships again. "I was wrong. Choice is not painful. It is the very essence of being alive. And I had stolen that essence from trillions of beings because I was too afraid to face the chaos that freedom brings." Marcus reached out and touched her arm, just as he had done a year ago in the throne room. "Fear is not weakness," he said. "Fear is just information. It tells us where the edges of our courage are, so that we know where we need to grow." Another piece of human wisdom, something my grandmother used to say, right before she made me do whatever I was afraid of. The Queen made that strange sound that Marcus had learned was Valith laughter. "Your species is still impossible. Do you know that just yesterday, one of your scientists asked permission to study the inside of a black hole? When I explained that this would result in certain death, she said that was acceptable as long as she could transmit her findings before. She was crushed. Did you give her permission? I told her to find a safer way. She looked at me like I had suggested. She stopped breathing. I believe she is currently designing a probe that can survive past the event horizon." "That sounds like us." A chime sounded and an aide appeared at the entrance to the observation deck. "Queen Seratos." "Captain Cole, The delegation from the outer reaches has arrived. They are requesting an audience. The Queen nodded. Tell them we will be there shortly. The aide departed and the Queen turned back to Marcus. 3 more species have requested membership in the Alliance this week. Word has spread beyond the borders of the former empire. Beings who never knew Valeth rule have heard about what humanity did, and they want to be part of whatever we are building. Marcus felt a warm glow of pride in his chest. What we are building is something that has never existed before. An alliance based on choice rather than force, on cooperation rather than conquest. It will be messy and chaotic, and there will probably be a lot more fistfights at political rallies. But it will be alive. The Queen finished, truly alive in a way my empire never was. Exactly. They walked together toward the exit. Toward the delegation that waited in the future that stretched out before them like an uncharted sea. There is something I have been meaning to ask you, the Queen said as they walked. On that day in my throne room, when you stood against the crown, were you not afraid? Marcus was quiet for a moment. I was terrified, he admitted. Every cell in my body was screaming at me to kneel, to give in, to make the pain stop. I have never been so afraid in my entire life. Then how did you keep walking? Marcus stopped and looked at the ancient Queen with eyes that held the weight of 100,000 years of human struggle, because that is what my people do. We feel the fear and we walk forward anyway, not because we are brave, but because the people who came before us were brave, and we owe it to them to keep going. He smiled, and because I knew that somewhere out there, 3,000 people were counting on me. My crew, my family, my species. I could not let them down, even if it meant walking straight into the heart of terror itself. The Queen studied him for a long moment. I have lived for 10,000 years, she said finally. I have seen stars born and die. I have watched civilizations rise and fall. I have wielded power beyond the imagination of most beings. She reached out and placed her hand on Marcus's shoulder. And I have never met anything in all that time as magnificent as humanity. They continued walking. The Queen of a transformed empire and the human who had refused to kneel, toward a future that neither of them could predict, but both of them were eager to face behind them. Through the great windows of Unity Station, the stars blazed with the light of 1 trillion suns. Each one a promise of worlds yet to be discovered, challenges yet to be overcome, wonders yet to be witnessed, and somewhere among those stars, on 1,000 ships and 100 colonies, humanity continued to do what it had always done. Reached for the impossible, and it refused to stop. The story of Marcus Cole and Queen Ceratos would be told for generations, passed down through the centuries as the tale of how one human stubbornness changed the fate of the galaxy. But the truth was simpler than any legend could capture. The truth was that humans had always been walking forward. From the first time an ancestor stood upright on a dangerous savannah to the moment a captain stood upright in a tyrant's throne room. It was all the same story, the story of a species that looked at the universe and said no. We will not kneel, we will not break, we will not stop, and that story was only just beginning.